Welcome to 2022. I have been very excited about this
Yes.
show for a while because we promised we're going to be positive going into this year and give some positive signs for what is happening and what is going to happen this year. So,
Yes, in fact, the subject of today's show, the focus is my tweet I sent out the other day, 10 wishes for 2022. Many of those wishes are on the positive side of things, as you admitted to me.
Yes.
But you've been talking to me off camera, living life, about how our last few shows have been bummers because we've been talking about what's wrong in the country, which is part of what we do.
Things.
Obviously, a lot of things are off track in this country. But
and also, we want to just bring people. We know that people like us are watching the news, and it gets very depressing sometimes.
Yes.
Very.
Yes.
So we want to be a little more positive about what might be coming down the pike in 2022.
But before we do, we have some positive news just we may have missed or just glossed over the past year. And one is we came across this factoid from Americans for Tax Reform, one of our favorite groups out there. So from 1933 to 1995, GOP controlled both chambers of Congress for 4 years, 6% of the time.
Wow, that was 4 out of 62 years.
Yes, but from 1995 to 2001, we've controlled 16 out of 26 years, 62%. So
and
the long-term trend here is pretty positive, you would agree.
And we're very hopeful for 2022.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. Also, just before we leave all these topics we discussed over the past few months, in New Jersey, our candidate almost won for governor with no money, no attention, almost received 50% of the vote, in fact, which was a huge upset.
That's really big news.
Although he did not win, it was still a huge upset, that number. Republicans also picked up a seat in the state Senate and picked up 6 seats in the state assembly. In riot-torn Seattle, by the way, these factoids come from Heritage Action, from the Heritage Foundation. In Seattle, Republican Ann Davidson pledging to restore law and order, a law and order platform. We'll be talking more about that in a bit. Was elected city attorney.
Thank goodness.
For her. In Texas, we flipped a seat that Joe Biden had carried by 14 points in 2020. Minneapolis, the ballot initiative that would have disbanded the city's police department and replaced it with social workers was defeated. Be happy for small victories, I guess. But just some factoids from the end of last year, last few months, to bring us up a little bit. But you wanted to do a show on the positives going forward, and we thought what better place to start than my tweet I put out the other day, which got a lot of reaction. And it was basically 10 wishes for the new year. And the first was and is police refunded. Now, this is, I should say, the dumbest idea we've heard in modern political times, at least.
You mean defunding the police? It's the dumbest dumbest issue ever.
Yeah. I also tweeted the other day about that commercial that ran during the Rose Bowl, the tapes of real 9/11 calls. Mm-hmm. It was an Apple Watch commercial that you could call Apple Watch on 911 as the message, but it reminded me about 911, who answers that phone, and not only who answers that phone, what happens then?
Who responds?
Do a bunch of social workers show up at the bank robbery or police? Give me a break. So police defunded was a bad idea whose time
is never
going to come. But incredibly, in American politics, it was an initiative picked up by at least some on the hard left, on the progressive left, on the uber liberal left.
And they had some success because of the media push, because of rioters, and some unfortunate circumstances, timely-wise, that occurred that allowed that agenda to get some sort of traction, which was amazing. And the results have been, of course, terrible, with so many beautiful cities in our country being ruined. And
violent crime
but there
rates
is
spiking.
We're getting to the positive. There is a turn of events in New York City. Our new mayor was a police officer,
Mayor
so
Adams,
it is
Captain.
much more law and order than we've seen in the past there.
He has an easy act to follow with de Blasio gone. But Mayor Adams, we wish you, in fact, I tweeted on this the other day, good luck to you. And we mean that. The country wishes you good luck.
Exactly.
In getting that city cleaned up. But I do want to, before we leave this topic, remind everyone about all the wokeness that followed this defund police deal and the cops show being canceled or at least postponed for a while and all the anti-police shenanigans out there. Never a good idea. And you saw a very tangible result, babe. You saw the premature retirements. You saw a lot of young people we need in law enforcement no longer finding that a viable career. Who needs it? Who needs the abuse? It was their attitude. And we've seen these numbers, this attrition occur in police forces across the country. As a former prosecutor, public defender, someone who believes in the system, this has really bothered you a great deal.
It has, and then we've had a lot of police shootings. And let's get to the positive, that there's been some real pushback against it. We've had some
Common
elections
sense
that have occurred, some local elections, that now we're getting people saying, hey, wait a minute, this is a terrible idea. Look what's happening in our city. Crime has spiked almost everywhere around the country. The addiction rates, the overdose numbers, the list goes on and on. So there is a real pushback, and that's where we want to get to the positive.
Well, it needs to be more than a pushback. It needs to be done. This is a bad idea. Again, as we said, an idea that was never made of common sense, and it needs to be jettisoned forever. And hopefully we're on that road.
And in this election year, all these little pieces, all these things that you've brought up and are going to bring up throughout the show, remember, we can help in November. Local elections, state elections.
We'll be getting to this, yes.
Yeah.
So police refunded was one. Number two, pipelines reopened. How about that? So, again, recall that President Biden coming into office wanted to undo everything that President Trump had done. His particular initiatives, energy independence was certainly one. And so what does the new president do? Well, we close pipelines. And at least one of the real consequences here has been a few months later, that same president of the United States, President Biden, going on national TV and begging OPEC for more supply, which was embarrassing.
It is. But the positive is Senator Manchin, yay for him on many fronts, but he has recently gone to the president and said, you need to open up the pipeline. And since he has become a very important person to this president,
the most important,
that maybe, just maybe, they'll start listening to that. And as people go to the pumps and have outrageous prices for gasoline, maybe, just maybe, we'll get this reopened.
But as energy costs continue to spiral, to skyrocket, really, I always go back to think how so much of what progressives do hurts the working class, hurts the working poor, hurts the poor. Again, no better example than the cost of living, the skyrocketing price of energy these days. The people who make less money typically are the ones who typically pay the price.
Absolutely.
Number three, speech restored. We could do the next 4 hours on this. You have read in my books, my columns, my speeches, what began in the 1970s, 1980s as a fringe movement to limit speech is now mainstream in America, and particularly on American campuses. Everywhere, we're losing part of our culture. Some colleges, however, on the positive side, are now beginning to get it. Some of the more elite colleges, especially in the news lately, some professors are finally standing up. Some alums, we talk about my annual giving speech every year. Hey, if your school's gone woke, don't send them the check. Send that check to a free speech group near you. This is happening now. To their credit, some professors are saying it's easy for conservative professors, there are a few out there, to do this, but for liberal professors to actually stand up against the woke mob and say, hey, the First Amendment still defines us or should define our mission in higher education, that's a big deal, and it's happening more and more these days. So that's, again, a positive. Going back to my annual giving thing, this is the time of year when all the schools are out there with their hands open, particularly schools that have gone woke. Remind them that go woke, go broke, no cash, money going to the First Amendment, for free speech, for really what a liberal arts education should be about. Critical thinking, learning all points of view respectfully in an environment of higher learning.
And some liberals, well-known liberals, are coming out and saying, wait a minute. Naomi Wolf,
yes,
Alan Dershowitz, Bill Maher, all coming out and saying, wait a minute, this goes too far. And cancel culture is not what the 60s liberal speech and protest on campus was all about. It was about free speech, about having
Dissent.
all types of speech out there. And certainly many of us, when the internet became so prevalent in our daily lives, thought that that was the platform that was always going to be free speech.
The guarantor.
Right.
How ironic.
How ironic.
And these academic constructs that came about in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and new millennium, particularly on our campuses, the safe zones, the speech codes, the trigger warnings, all these constructs. That's what they are. They're constructs. They were just made up.
Made up.
By these liberal administrators and professors. They are making, and I've made this point to our sons, they're making for a soft generation. They're making for kids who literally are taught throughout grade school, middle school, high school, and now college that they get to go through life without having to confront opposing viewpoints, being comfortable, not being uncomfortable. This is crazy.
And that is so anti-American. It's not what the country was built on at all.
It's not what capitalism is about, that's for sure.
Right.
It's about successes and failures, and when you fail, you try again.
And discussion in changing people's perspectives and points of view is fun. It's interesting. It's something that certainly I grew up with around the dinner table, and not everybody agreed. And that's the way it's supposed to be. How boring will life be if everyone agrees and goes along the way? Of course, that's what socialism is.
Yeah,
You follow the line, follow that blue line.
Ask those poor folks in Hong Kong these days what socialism looks like. Mm-hmm. So my admonition to young people, wherever I am, is
stand up.
Fight soft. Don't be soft. Fight soft, because you'll be better off in the long run for it. Number 4, woke rebuff, just what we're talking about here. Again, young folks especially, rebuff woke. Actively oppose the Twitter mobs. Return to common sense. Equality. Dr. King. Fairness. Everything the country's supposed to be about. Liberty. We'll get to liberty in a second. Make it happen at the ballot box. Rebuff woke. It's not real. It's not real. It's phony. It's come about to make some people feel better about themselves, I guess.
And give certain people power.
Yeah, it's antithetical to real life. So rebuff woke. 5. Again, we could spend hours on this, and we talked about in the context of Virginia a great deal. Parents respected. And in this context especially, local school boards, local education, local autonomy, local curricula, the ability of parents to participate in their kids' education. These are tax-paying public school parents paying for public schools. Parents have a right to be heard. They have a right not to be arrested. They have a right not to be the subject of a Twitter mob. They have a right not to be investigated by the FBI and the Attorney General of the United States. This was the central message that came from the election in Virginia. Terry McAuliffe made the big mistake of saying exactly what progressives think about parents and education, and he paid the price for it.
The other thing, the positive thing about COVID was we brought the classroom into our homes, and that opened a lot of parents' eyes of, wait, I can't believe this is what is happening and what is being taught to my child, and I'm not in agreement with it, and I'm showing up at the school board meeting, at the PTA meeting, or whatever, as well the parents should, and now parents are taking more control.
And as we've said, I've never done events for local school board candidates in the past. It's too far down ballot, quite frankly. I'd be always doing events, right? But I've changed my rule. I'm doing now events for local school board candidates because these days, this is the major front in the culture war.
And it affects us directly. We have a son in public school.
We do.
In Anne Arundel County, Maryland. So we want to know what's happening in his school.
This is a culture war, at least a front in the culture war, we cannot afford to lose. We must engage. And again, asking the average parent, raising their kids, paying their bills, doing their thing, asking the average person who's already overwhelmed in many cases to show up at the local school board, participate here, scream bloody murder when you don't like what's happening. It's not easy, particularly knowing they're going to be called names. The Twitter mob may come after them,
And
all this stuff.
And particularly that they don't get any help from the media. The media will underreport what the parents want as opposed to what the school board wants and what elites want.
But in a point we made on numerous occasions, and it needs to be repeated, what determined that race in Virginia was not Republicans. It was, in particular counties, blue-leaning parents saying, no, enough of the woke stuff, enough of the progressive stuff, enough of the revisionism. This is my kid.
When government
I get to say
comes between me and my child, that's when
that's the line.
That's the line.
And the National Republican Committee and the NRCC and all those national pundits out there who make their money for Republican candidates, take note. Number 6, prosecutors recalled. One of your favorite subjects here. Look at California these days. The Soros prosecutors are being exposed, but what a price, babe. What a price we're paying for this exposure. The price being deaths, murders, skyrocketing crime rates in our major cities because Soros prosecutors got elected under the radar in too many large cities over the last 10 years.
I mean, just think about the fact that Soros is backing them. You know, he hates everything about this country. I've always thought he's just jealous. He's not from this country and he hates it. And so these people are literally letting criminals back on the streets. And they're not following our great criminal justice system. And I don't care what you say, it's the best in the world. And generally it works. And we've seen it work recently a couple of times that everybody's had some relief. Like, see, it is a great system. It does work. Jury of your peers can come to a good resolution and the right and just thing. So at any rate, it's good to know that there's some people stepping up to the plate. We need people to step up to the plate, particularly in cities like Baltimore and Chicago and Seattle and Portland, where these crime rates are out of control and it's really like the Wild West.
Here's the interesting thing about these prosecutors. They're so woke, they're so far gone, that given these numbers, they're still in denial. We've seen the interviews over the past few weeks and months. They're still in denial. They're still woke. They don't care. And when it's pointed out that the victims here typically are minority victims in these cities, it doesn't change their minds. It has no impact on them.
None whatsoever. You're right. They're in denial, or that's what they say. They say in the press, "Oh, it's not that bad."
It's not that bad. Well, the body counts pile up.
Tell that to the mother that has lost their child.
We talked earlier about President Trump and President Biden and the fact that President Biden, first day in office, said we're going to simply repeal everything President Trump did, including things that are working. Well, Stay in Mexico is working, and number 7 is border reinforced. We've talked about the drugs. We've talked about the sex traffickers. We've talked about the terror suspects. We've talked about the terrified citizens on the border. And here's my point here, babe. Progressives have miscalculated this issue. Progressives and many Democrats over the years got used to Hispanic voters 2-to-1 voting their way, part of the new Democratic base in the modern era. But Hispanic voters living near the border are the most at-risk group given what's coming over the border these days. Hispanic voters reject borderlessness. Hispanic voters support sovereignty. And so, again, what the modern Uber left, the progressive left, has done is take the party so far left, they've now alienated many Hispanic voters. You see these seats being flipped along the border. You saw the major uptick in Hispanic support for President Trump. This is a real trend line.
I was just going to say, they miscalculated because that is the one issue that you could argue got Donald Trump elected president in 2016. I mean, it was the dominant issue that he campaigned on, for sure.
But he fulfilled that promise.
He did.
And the left bet, oh, wait a second, Hispanic voters are going to be turned off by all this.
Oh, no.
By this
They
nativism.
liked it.
It's nativist. No. It's called the law. It's called legality. It's called sovereignty. It's called protecting your people at the border.
Well, like you said, many of these families are at risk if they're living near or at the border. Then their families are at risk for the crime, for the drugs, for constant living in fear.
They're living in fear. So, again, this potentially is a major realignment within both political parties, the Hispanic vote. You've heard me give a speech for how long have we known each other?
Long
Over
time.
3 decades, right? About the future of the
All
Republican
fabulous.
Party is more Hispanic votes.
Right.
I wasn't breaking new ground there, but it's happening. And it's happening more what the Democrats are doing than the Republicans. Number 8, inflation repulsed. Now, you certainly don't look your age, my dear, but you do remember the 70s, and we remember President Ford, and we remember inflation, and we remember OPEC, and we remember the lines, and we remember the cost of living, and we remember why President Carter lost to President Reagan. So comparisons to the Carter era are popular these days. Inflation is the meanest tax on the poor you can think of. The working poor never get ahead, of course, because inflation eats up their raises. So it's difficult to rebut as a campaign issue because there was very little inflation a year ago in this country, and now inflation is no longer transitory. We heard that term a lot early on, but now the powers that be in D.C., even the president's admitting, no, it's not transitory. It's here to stay for a while, and this mean regressive tax on the poor is not going away. As I said, it's a very difficult campaign issue to rebut.
Well, it is going to be, but again, by the time we get toward November, they'll say, "Oh, it's not that bad," and again, sort of in a denial way. But
good luck with
again, I think people will still recognize when they go to the grocery store, when they go to the gas station, when they have to live
every day.
Their everyday functions are really still going to be very impacted.
Number 9, liberty reclaimed. This is interesting. So when I talk about liberty, I'm talking about just living as Americans, being free to travel, to not worry about mask mandates, to not worry about vaccine, not losing your job over vaccine mandates,
to not have empty shelves,
to not seeing empty shelves at the grocery store, to giving your opinion in the workplace that may even be pro-Trump and not have to worry about Twitter mobs coming after you. Take cancel culture down. It's a cancer. It's a cancer on our culture, and it's called cancel culture. Teach your kids to love and appreciate the country, which brings us to number 10, and we're going to spend a few minutes on this. America resolved. And resolved is a very positive term. You resolve to change things. You resolve to get better. You resolve to turn things around. You resolve to return to the America we deserve to have. And there's very many constituent elements of this, and we just came up with a few.
Well, we've been through a rough time that has really impacted our liberty. And so I think Americans are thinking more and more about what type of life they want to lead. And they see this wokeness and this cancer culture and this defunding police and crime, and it's not what they want. So people are coming back.
So one constituent element here, restore law and order.
Yay.
Be able to walk down in the streets of Baltimore.
The crazy thought of restoring law and
Yeah.
order.
But again, law and order is a huge issue these days.
Huge issue that's going to take a lot of time because, like you said, who's going to want those jobs being a police officer these days? So
this is America 2022. All the technology in the world, the most successful country in the history of man. Conduct elections that are free, fair, and unquestioned. How about that? What a goal. Free, fair, and unquestioned. Have paper ballots as a backup. Have a week or two election day if you want, but make sure the people that are voting are actually the people they say they are. Photo identification is common sense. Majorities in both parties agree. Just get it done. And by the way, only citizens get to vote. You see now in these municipalities around the country, again, a very interesting and disturbing trend from the left. Non-citizens voting in municipal elections.
And the strongest against that are the people that have become citizens recently because they recognize what it really means.
America resolved. How about returning our military to understanding their central mission, defeating the bad guys, defeating our enemies, not being woke, keeping the peace, not being woke.
Right.
Peace through strength. Carry a big hammer.
And to be strong and not buy into all of the wokeness and all of the softness in the society.
America resolved. Free speech everywhere, including on campus, including in the workplace. Give your opinion. We teach our kids. We've taught our kids from day one. You go to college, and we have one in college. Take your conservative values with you. Fight for them. Be respectful. Respect those with other opinions, but don't back down. Do not back down. This country is never about backing down. The Ehrlichs are not about backing down, ever, including in our own discussions at the House. School is for learning, not indoctrination. The 3 R's. Reading,
well, it's
writing,
critical
arithmetic.
thinking, too. It's presenting an argument.
It's learning. It's learning, the critical thinking.
Learning, which includes listening.
The definition of a liberal arts education.
Right.
Appreciating the other side. Critical thinking. Well, I know maybe that fact supports my view, but I understand your point B over here, and I respect it, but here's my criticism, or here's my thought, or here's where I can support you, or here's how we can compromise.
And looking up real facts.
Yeah.
Right now, the country is full of all kinds of misinformation, and making and discerning what that is. Unfortunately, you can't even really trust science right now, but hopefully there'll come a time where you can, or go to the area where the expert in science are and look at those facts.
As I used to remind the Baltimore Sun in our daily fights, you can have your own opinions, you don't have your own facts.
Right.
Freedom of religion, not freedom from religion. The secular left has taught generations of young people, no, it's freedom from religion. No. It's the Judeo-Christian culture forms part of the foundation of our country. That's just a fact. That's just a fact. It's not freedom from religion. It's freedom. You could be free to practice religion or not practice religion. There's no central religion. There's no state religion, but we are religious people.
Absolutely.
And
we need more of it.
And secularism from the left is very dangerous in our view. Stop pretending government can keep printing money to cover its debts. How about that one?
I don't even know where to begin. Those numbers are so incomprehensible. Most people it just flies by them because they just can't comprehend them.
At some point, even America has to pay for our sins, our printing money sins, and that time maybe in the near future. Who knows? Celebrate, and this is the most. We'll close the show with this, but this is worth focusing on. Celebrate our exceptionalism while recognizing our faults. And here's where both sides are talking by each other in the realm of public education and all this progressivism, all this revisionism coming to our public schools. We can teach our kids the evils of slavery and Jim Crow and mistakes the United States has made as a country and as a culture while celebrating our incredible successes. Right. They're not mutually exclusive.
Absolutely.
Right? And most people used to understand this, right and left. This is not hard. You go to school, you go to college, hey, we made a mistake here, hey, we're great here, hey, maybe we can do better here. But to pretend this is a zero-sum game, that America is inherently evil from the jump or America is inherently perfect from the jump, neither is true. But the greatest experiment in individual freedom and autonomy and pluralism, assimilation, capitalism, freedom, liberty is the United States of America.
And we get to live here.
And we get to live here in this incredibly prosperous time. Even when things are down in this country, we're still very prosperous. We're still very free. So that's why we're so sensitive to these movements that cut into our freedom. Adults can understand this. Kids can understand this. We have to get back to this central premise that we can distinguish between our faults, and there are many, and our successes, and how exceptional this grand experiment in pluralism and freedom truly is.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. And please go to bobehrlich.com. Lots of common sense there. You'll feel better, even better than after listening to this show today.
Wait a second. What's going to make them feel much better?
The next holiday coming, Valentine's Day, everybody wants. Original, unconventional, and inconvenient.
What woman would not want this book for Valentine's Day, huh?
Trust me, for a woman who's gotten books for Valentine's Day, you'll love it. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. God.